I and Oriana grew up together in an orphanage since childhood. We met, got to know each other, fell in love, and loved each other. Shortly after she gave birth to our child, her biological parents found her, making her the sole heiress of the Song family. Our son received elite education from a young age and changed his surname to Song. Many years later, when I handed the divorce papers to Oriana, she was somewhat impatient and asked why. I replied calmly, because last night, the food I cooked got cold. Chapter 1. Are you leaving empty-handed? Don't be impulsive. Our son can't go with you. Oriana's gaze never left her phone screen. Her company was about to go public. I used to be proud of her transformation, but now only a trail of broken pieces remains. I give up custody of Ezekiel. Before marriage, there was only that small apartment. It was my only thing. Mentioning the small apartment we once cramped into, Oriana relaxed her brows and eyes. Are you still angry that Alex brought me back last night? He's just a business friend. Yeah, a friend who knew you were married and still relentlessly pursued you. I didn't say anything, just looked at Oriana. It had been a long time since I had the chance to properly observe her. Oriana was impeccably made up. Her pink diamond earrings on her earlobes were equivalent to our expenses over the past few months. But after a few years, things had changed. Seeing me shake my head, she was somewhat impatient and asked why. I replied calmly, because last night, the food I cooked got cold. Before Oriana was taken back by the Song family, I was a full-time short story writer, and my only hobby was cooking. Oriana studied finance. Her initial salary was low, and it was tough for her. She often skipped meals because she was too busy. I packed her meals every day and delivered them to her. She always said it was the best food she had ever eaten. Later, Oriana Lee was found by the Song family. She insisted on keeping the Lee surname and was determined not to divorce me. I continued, as usual, preparing 3 meals for her. In the first year, she told me she wanted to eat my cooking for the rest of her life, but after a few years, she was sent back drunk by a suitor. I took her from the man's shoulder and urged her to eat something to fill her stomach. Looking at the food I had made, she said with disgust, "The family has a chef. You don't need to make this every day. Why don't you go to the company when I tell you to? Are you that idle every day?" I didn't like doing business, so I was unwilling to get involved with the Song family's enterprises. Ezekiel was very clingy to her and would only come down to eat when he heard her voice. I handed him the food, but he shook his head. I asked why he didn't eat. Oriana thought my tone was too harsh. He likes Western food, doesn't like home-cooked meals. What's the problem? Ezekiel, seeing someone backing him up, pushed hard with his hand. The porcelain bowl shattered, the soup scalded my arm, and Oriana hugged the child, softly comforting him. Then she turned her gaze to me again. Just have someone clean it up. I'm tired. Chapter 2. Looking into Oriana's puzzled eyes, I didn't bother with many words. In her eyes, perhaps only the flow of millions of funds now counts as something significant, and Ezekiel was even more indifferent to it. He had been exposed to elite education since childhood and had more than once yearned for a more impressive father, a man who could make waves in the business world. At least not someone who likes to cook in the kitchen. Under the daylight, Oriana finally noticed the burn on my arm. She called Ezekiel over. "Dad was injured last night. Go comfort him quickly." Ezekiel was adept at various speech competitions, but in front of me, he always refused to speak. I didn't have a father and thought that giving enough care would earn my child's love. But the truth proved I lacked that talent. Ezekiel only looked at me coldly, except for a few times when he babbled "Dad" while learning to speak. In the end, I never heard him call out, "You're not worthy to be my father." Oriana pinched Ezekiel's nose as a punishment. "The house on Old Street is too dilapidated, and it will take some time to complete the paperwork. You can stay here for now. Didn't you love the set of kitchenware I gave you the most? It's not easy to take it away." Last night, I had already packed up the things. Just one suitcase. If no one is using that set of kitchenware, just throw it away. After I replied, I suddenly found it amusing. Song family's meals are all specially prepared and delivered by someone. If it weren't for me, this residence wouldn't have needed to consider a kitchen, nor would it have an expensive set of kitchenware. "Are you going back to Old Street? I'll have the butler take you." I refused, looked at mother and son, and smiled as I said, "You two are allergic to many things. When you have time, call the family doctor for tests and inform the chefs." After saying that, I turned and left, without looking back at the 2 people I once loved most in this world. Chapter 3. I didn't go back to Old Street directly. Instead, I went to the orphanage where I was born and raised. Oriana had also discussed coming here with me, but the Song family might have thought it wasn't prestigious enough, so they kept postponing the plan. Over the years, I had been donating a portion of my writing fees to the orphanage. As soon as I walked in, the director recognized me. She still didn't know that Oriana and I were divorced and began reminiscing about childhood memories with me. "Oriana and I grew up here. She is a year younger than me. and we were both small in stature at the time. The director suddenly pointed to the back kitchen and said that I had been watching the chef uncle since I was young and wanted to cook myself. Oriana didn't like garlic, but the orphanage's policy was not to allow picky eating among the children. However, later on, every time I cooked, I would secretly omit the garlic. The director suddenly felt emotional, and my interest was piqued. So she assigned me the cook's task for today's lunch. I started the fire, added wood, chopped vegetables, and cooked soup. Several children gathered around me chattering. A brother who can cook is so cool. It smells great. I want to be a chef when I grow up. Give me 10 stars. Amid these compliments, I remembered the first time I met Song family's parents. Oriana was even more nervous than me when they heard that my profession was writing and my hobby was cooking. If it weren't for their naturally dignified demeanor and their insistence of owing many daughters, they might as well have had "please leave" written on their faces. Song father only said one sentence: "Good for nothing. I don't associate with such people." News spread quickly within the circle, and Oriana suddenly gained many relatives and friends. Every guest who came to our home would joke with Oriana when they saw me cooking. "Your husband is really rare. He can cook." Alex also frowned and expressed concern for her. "Oriana, doesn't your husband have a smell from cooking? Can he sleep well at night?" With so much teasing, Oriana couldn't keep it up on her face anymore, but she still considered my pride and only gently told me, "When friends come over, let the staff cook. The Song family can afford to hire chefs." Ezekiel was also influenced. "My dad isn't just a lousy chef who only cooks. How embarrassing. My dad should be a great hero." Chapter 4. I stayed at the orphanage for a few days and then returned to my old street residence. Suppressing the memories that were everywhere, I began to clean up my things. When Oriana was taken back, the Song family instructed us not to bring anything, assuring us that they had everything needed for the child. All the furnishings in the old house were frozen in time on that day. I initially thought it was like winning the lottery, but it turned out to be the wake-up call from my sweet dreams. After clearing out everything related to Oriana, I took a nap and only woke up around noon. I discovered more than a dozen missed calls on my phone, all from Oriana. While I was going through my phone, a call came from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, are you Ezekiel's father? I'm Ezekiel's homeroom teacher. The child refused to eat the school cafeteria lunch today, saying that his father usually packs his meals." There was a pause on the other end, and the caller politely continued, "Did you forget today is the first day of school?" I frowned, not understanding what Ezekiel was up to. Ezekiel attended the best elementary school in the country, where the cafeteria not only focused on taste but also on nutritional balance. Moreover, several times when I packed his meals, he brought them back unchanged. "Hello, teacher. He doesn't need the meals I prepare. In the future, our family chef should take over his diet," I replied calmly. I added, "I am no longer Ezekiel's father. For his matters, you can directly contact his mother. Please don't disturb me anymore." Perhaps the teacher had her phone on speaker, because Ezekiel was standing nearby, listening clearly. Upon hearing a startled voice from the other end, "Ezekiel, don't run away." The teacher quickly apologized to me before hanging up the call. I recalled my own childhood and realized there was no such thing as an inscrutable adolescence back then. However, Ezekiel's emotions had actually been quite stable all along. His grandparents didn't want him staying with me and would take him back every summer vacation. Ezekiel's attitude towards me grew increasingly cold. In the beginning, he would ask me, "Why do you always do menial tasks? Don't you think you're wasting your time and potential? Why do other uncles fly planes while you just cook at home?" Eventually, he no longer wanted to communicate with me. The only updates about him came through the parent group chat. He was indifferent to it, and several elders from the Song family were pleased to see Ezekiel distancing himself from me. I hung up the call and went shopping at the mall. Just as I was diligently comparing prices, Oriana called. "What did you tell Ezekiel? He refuses to eat. Can you come back? The child still needs you." I then heard a deep male voice. "Let's take Ezekiel to my newly opened Western restaurant." Oriana seemed to be distancing herself from him, and with no one else around, she continued, "That was a business partner. Do you know where my allergy medicine is? The chef doesn't know I'm allergic to carrots." I could tell from her voice that she was somewhat aggrieved and helplessly frowned. "Oriana, if you can't find it, order online or have someone buy it directly. It would be faster than waiting for my call. I asked you to have a doctor test the allergens for you and Ezekiel because I don't want this situation to happen again." Oriana was silent for a moment. "Can you send your recipes to the chef? Great-grandfather misses your cooking very much. Are you ignoring Ezekiel's family duties? I'm usually busy at the company." Mentioning great-grandfather immediately softened my heart. He was the only elder in the Song family who supported me and truly enjoyed my cooking. However, I didn't want any more entanglements with the Song family. Home-cooked recipes are available everywhere online. "Oriana, the child doesn't recognize me as his father. You know this well. I want to start my own new life. Please don't bother me anymore. Let's each be well." Before she could finish, I hung up the phone and blocked her number. With such interruptions, I didn't want to continue selecting kitchenware either. An indescribable fatigue weighed on my heart. I took a shower and fell back into a deep sleep. Chapter 5. Perhaps because too many things had happened recently, my dreams were bizarre and surreal. I dreamed of the orphanage, in corners unseen by teachers, where silent bullying occurred. I saw Oriana being protected by me from behind, desperately trying to help me fight back. I thought of the night our child was born. I had never believed in Buddha. Kneeling at the entrance of the operating room, I hoped to exchange my life for her safety. Waking up in the middle of the night, heavy rain was pouring outside the window. Rain always seemed to be writing poems and composing music for memories. I remembered a winter night in my sophomore year when I came out of the library. Oriana ran up to me, her face flushed against the backdrop of heavy snow. She handed me a roasted sweet potato she had been holding in her pocket, urging me to eat it slowly. I bit into a hard object and pulled out a DIY ring. Oriana's eyes sparkled, brimming with uncontainable love. Let's give each other a home. There wasn't a single word, love, but it was the most beautiful confession I'd ever heard. Later, I prepared a real ring, a small diamond embodying all my love. On the day we returned to the orphanage to visit the director, I proposed to her. After that, I worked desperately to write stories and bought this small house. We lay together in our own home, whispering sweet nothings. 4 seasons, 3 meals a day, 2 people under one roof. We were lovers and family. When we found out we were having a child, we couldn't help but embrace and shed tears of joy. Oriana was under a lot of pressure, and after getting pregnant, she was partly let go from her job. I handed all my writing fees to her so she wouldn't have to worry about living and could focus on her pregnancy. She felt sorry for my repetitive typing leading to tendinitis and massaged my hands every night. I vowed in my heart to work harder to protect them for a lifetime. As our child was about to be born, the doctor jokingly asked me, "Do you want a boy or a girl?" I wanted a girl, preferably one who looked a lot like her mother, to give her the greatest love and warmth, to make up for our gloomy childhood at the orphanage. The birth of our son didn't leave me with much regret either. I thought having a boy was great too, growing up to protect his mother alongside me. Chapter 6. When our child turned 1 month old, Oriana told me that her biological parents had found her and wanted her to return. She had been abducted as a child, and the Song couple had never had another child, dedicating their lives solely to finding her. I was genuinely happy for her, knowing that there were more people in the world who loved her, but this love was overwhelming. And gradually Oriana no longer needed me by her side. She had to take over the Song family's business, inevitably attending various banquets and frequently meeting with business elites. She no longer loved the scent of Qingju perfume and switched to more high-end brands. Alex appeared when Ezekiel was 4 years old. Due to financial transactions, the Liu family and the Song family became very close. They needed to attend many events together. I had brought this up with Oriana before because I noticed that the two of us rarely appeared together around our child. She dismissed it. Ezekiel isn't an ordinary child. He can understand. I pressed further, but Oriana blamed me for overthinking and not understanding her. Financial dealings are inevitable. Don't be insecure and overthink. That single remark left me speechless. Once, I wrote a short story where the male protagonist assumed that his secretary was always by his side. Oriana held my face, leaving a deep kiss on my forehead, infused with her warmth and her pure and passionate attitude towards love. If you're like this scumbag, neglecting the people around you, then go sleep on the sofa. I smiled and obediently agreed. The rain outside the window gradually lessened. Dawn was approaching. Chapter 7. I returned to the life I had 3 years ago, writing, working out, and continuing to hone my culinary skills. While I was showering, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Wrapping myself in a bath towel, I faced an unfamiliar person. "Sir." "Hello. I am the chef responsible for the meals of the Miss and the Master of the Song family." Instinctively, I wanted to close the door, but the person quickly pressed their foot against it. "Sir, I've come to seek your culinary expertise. The Miss and Master aren't accustomed to others cooking and have lost a significant amount of weight. Also, the elderly gentleman is seriously ill and would like to try your cooking." Taking a deep breath, I wiped my wet hair. "You don't need to call me sir. I'm not your employer from the Song family. Moral coercion won't work. If you keep harassing me, I'll report you to the police." The person sheepishly withdrew their foot and went downstairs. Just as they left, a call came in from an unfamiliar number. "Duncan, your son is throwing a tantrum because he wants to eat your fried rice. Luckily, you put up bumper stickers at home." Ezekiel ran around and bumped into the stairway corner. "How are you getting him to listen during reading lessons? Several tutors can't control him. Also, great-grandfather is sick and misses you a lot." I had once vowed not to give Oriana any reason to feel inferior or submissive, but when her pleading voice came through the phone, all I felt was endless annoyance and disappointment. For these past few years, I had prepared 3 meals a day for her and our child. I ignored the rumors, never thinking that housework was only a burden for women or servants. I only knew that love was meticulous care, regardless of gender. I would track Oriana's menstrual cycle, prepare warm soup in advance, and send messages reminding her to have painkillers ready. During Ezekiel's rainy seasons when he had a fever, I would prepare medicinal meals and rush to the school to make arrangements. Meanwhile, Oriana would be too busy with meetings to respond to my messages. Ezekiel would complain to his grandparents that it was embarrassing for him to tell me he was sick. The delicious food I made for great-grandfather would be dismissed by others as my scheming to please the Song family. As enthusiasm faded over time, only exhaustion and indifference remained. Oriana, we grew up together. You should understand what kind of person I am. We're adults now. We should know what it means to end things. I don't understand why you and Ezekiel have suddenly changed like this. Is it because you can't adapt? Keep some dignity and decency for yourself, and set an example for our child. Don't bother me anymore, and don't make me look down on you. There was a moment of silence on the other end. I lost patience and hung up the phone. Chapter 8. People from the Song family would occasionally come to harass me. I had grown tired of these inexplicable tests. It wasn't that they were insignificant, but sometimes I really needed them. The world doesn't require anyone's presence. Life can go on without anyone. This clear realization made me decide to sell the property. I wanted to use the money I had saved to explore the world, to experience various cuisines. Sweet in the south, salty in the north, spicy in the east, and sour in the west. I wanted to try them all and uncover the cultures behind them. In the eyes of the Song family, valuing food seemed like something shameful. At a family banquet, I quietly suggested to Oriana that we could take Ezekiel to try local delicacies. Oriana frowned. His programming classes are fully booked. Don't let him go astray. If you want him to eat something, just have someone buy it or hire someone to prepare it. Song father snorted, focusing only on eating every day. What prospects does that lead to? I think the husband you chose is just tacky. Oriana didn't say anything on my behalf, and Ezekiel was unwilling to sit next to me. He ran over to Song father's side. Our Ezekiel is different from ordinary children in the future, and Oriana never said a word of explanation for me. In the past, being called a treasure girl for marrying me was seen as something glorious, but now, without burdens and not being tied down by family, all that remained was the bittersweet expectation for the future. Chapter 9. The house was sold quickly. I grabbed my bag and left without hesitation. I used to think that cooking was a way to make Oriana and Ezekiel happy, which in turn made me happy. After going through these events, I realized that I simply loved cooking and the anticipation of presenting delicious food, spices, flipping the wok. Every step was a way to heat up life. I also started a food live streaming channel, attracting a large following with my culinary skills and good looks. My first stop was Jiangxi. This city, awakened by the aroma of claypot soup, had a fast pace but was willing to pause for numerous delicious foods. Expressing satisfied sighs, I wandered the city until late at night and entered a humble eatery. The owner was very enthusiastic, wearing a towel around his neck, his forehead sweating despite the cold winter. He asked if I could handle spicy food. I nodded and agreed to eat spicy. The moment the rice noodles touched my mouth, I realized that this level of spiciness was beyond my tolerance. Coughing uncontrollably from the heat, a few locals handed me a bowl of soup. I took the bowl, swallowing the tears from the spiciness. It felt as if my entire soul was soaking in a hot spring, achieving a state of transcendence. Later, as I live streamed and shared the food, my number of followers kept increasing, leading me all the way to Inner Mongolia. The people here were very interested in my experiences, and I cooked the local snacks I had learned along the way for them to taste. As a result of being so popular, I was invited to participate in the Nadim festival. The vast grasslands set the foundational colors, and colorful flags fluttered in the wind. People from all over the world hummed unfamiliar melodies and danced various dances. Finally, a bonfire was lit, and food became the main attraction. I felt the closest connection between food and the land, learning the herders' dances. In this feast, the lights on the distant mountain ridges adorned the entire night sky. I shed tears, unnoticed by anyone. I had once fantasized about coming to an unfamiliar place with Oriana, seeing different landscapes, but now I realized that one person could do that alone. Without the constraints of ideas or the limitations of time, there was only boundless freedom. I lay down on the grassland with the herders, feeling the wind brush through my hair. It was like a lover awkwardly kissing your brows, smoothing away all loneliness. The vast world held great potential. Chapter 10. Several years passed, and my food travels came to an end. I returned to the orphanage. This year was the headmaster's 60th birthday, as well as the anniversary of the orphanage's founding, and there would be a charity fundraising event. Not only did I take on the role of head chef, but I also helped organize the fundraising meeting. The children here really liked me, and they especially loved the meals I cooked. One day, while playing nearby, the children found an injured puppy. The headmaster initially didn't allow pets, but I stepped in and offered to take care of it, suggesting that it could help the children develop a greater sense of empathy and responsibility for life. The headmaster reluctantly shook his head. All right, spoil them if you must, The children's cheers were so loud they nearly overwhelmed me. That night, when I went to bed, I found my room door stuffed with candies. At first, the children would casually call me brother or uncle, but one day, they all started calling me dad. It left me both amused and perplexed. But having come from an orphan background myself, I understood the children's yearning for love. Chapter 11. One day, a charitable organization donated tickets for the children to visit an amusement park for free. A few teachers were chaperoning, and I was among them. While I was in front of the line exchanging tickets, a sudden commotion erupted from behind. The children had started fighting. I rushed over and heard shouting, "Dad is my dad. Don't call him that." "Who are you? You're the one who shouldn't be calling him dad." "I'm Ezekiel. Stay away from my dad. I'm his real son." "You're a liar. Dad's last name is Lee, not Song. You're just a braggart." It had been years since I last saw Ezekiel. He had grown taller and thinner. I only recognized him after hearing those few words. I separated the children and sternly asked, "Who started this? Speak up." I rarely got angry, but my sternness made the kids lower their heads. Ezekiel, looking guilty, came over and grabbed my shirt. "Dad, I started it. They were calling you dad, but you're my dad." I gently pulled his hand off my shirt and squatted down to look him in the eye, saying seriously, "No matter what, hitting others is wrong. Do you understand the difference between right and wrong?" He ignored my words, his eyes turning red as he looked at me. "I don't care, Dad. Do you not want me anymore?" I frowned, confused by the situation with the Song family. The child had completely lost his sense of responsibility. I stood up and scanned the area. Oriana was standing not far away. "Duncan, the child really misses you." Her makeup was still perfect, but it couldn't hide the exhaustion in her posture. When Oriana and I first parted ways, I had imagined what it would be like when we met again. I thought I would be overwhelmed with emotions, either in excitement or tears, but at that moment, I felt nothing. I only glanced at Ezekiel, who was still staring down the other children, and felt a sense of trouble. I asked the children if anyone was hurt. A girl named Emma timidly raised her hand. "Dad, the little wooden figure you made for me got broken." Ezekiel became even more agitated. "That was Dad's gift to me." No one was injured, so I relaxed and contacted the teacher in charge. I reassured Emma that I would make her another wooden figure just like the one she had, plus an even bigger one to make up for it. Emma, satisfied, joined the others and happily went on her way. Chapter 12. Ezekiel was still causing a scene, and Oriana couldn't handle him on her own. I walked over. "Ezekiel, it's been years, and you've really let me down." Ezekiel hadn't expected to be reprimanded right after seeing me. He stood there, stunned. I continued, looking at the boy before me. "You were wrong to hit someone first, and even worse for not apologizing when you broke someone else's belongings. Most importantly, you lied. You threw away the wooden figurine. Don't you remember?" The wooden figurine was a toy the headmaster had taught me how to make, and I had also made one for Ezekiel. One morning, I found it in the trash can. The servants told me that young Master Ezekiel said it was unwanted garbage and ordered it to be thrown out. Yes, I had forgotten it then, but he always had the newest toys, and if he wanted something, there was nothing he couldn't get. A flicker of guilt appeared in Ezekiel's eyes, and he trembled as he said, "Dad, I was wrong. This child, I once had endless hopes for him. I hoped he would grow up strong and healthy, becoming a man to protect his mother, and I stayed up all night caring for him when he was sick. But now, his importance to me was no greater than any of the children in the orphanage." Maybe it was the coldness in my eyes that he understood, for he stepped back behind Oriana. Chapter 13. I went back to the orphanage to prepare dinner for the children. To my surprise, Oriana and Ezekiel showed up at the dinner table. "I didn't prepare dinner for you. You'll have to take care of it yourselves." Oriana's eyes looked hurt as she asked, "Is it really so difficult to add 2 more sets of utensils?" I replied, "The orphanage is short on funds, don't you know?" Oriana fell silent, and Ezekiel stared hungrily at the other children's food. The headmaster, sensing the tension between us, discreetly called me outside. From the headmaster, I learned that Song family had been sponsoring the recent activities and outings for the children. Considering the children's happy smiles these days, it seemed only right for me to cook a meal for them. Since both mother and son were sensitive to many foods, I simply made some egg noodles for them. Ezekiel ate quickly, finishing his bowl in just a few bites, but Oriana only stared at her bowl of noodles, not eating. Ezekiel looked at her plate with longing. "Mom, if you're not going to eat that, can I have it?" He repeated it twice, and Oriana finally responded, tightly covering her bowl. "No, this bowl is mine. No one can take it. This bowl is for me. No one can take it." Chapter 14. The summer at the orphanage was hot, and to save on electricity, the children squeezed into one air-conditioned room. Ezekiel wanted to sleep with me. "Dad, all those stories you used to tell me, I can't find them online. The mouse who stole corn, Did it ever get through that big door? I gave him a confused look, wondering if he had suddenly changed somehow. Why was he suddenly so interested in those old stories? I still remember that one family dinner when Ezekiel had disappeared. I went looking for him and found him with Alex. The two were holding hands, like a real father and son. Mr. Alex, your adventures are so cool. Way more interesting than the stories my dad tells. I should be your son instead. Alex chuckled, his eyes full of sincerity. Sure, as long as your mother agrees. Ezekiel clenched his fists. Mom will definitely agree. She thinks that men is useless. These memories came flooding back at the wrong time. I held up a hand, signaling for Ezekiel to be quiet, ignoring the hurt in his eyes. I motioned for him to follow me. Since other children were resting nearby, I found Oriana and asked, "Has your life script with Ezekiel finished?" "Oriana, you know what it's like to leave here. You know how hard it is for the teachers at the orphanage. And now they have to spend energy taking care of you too. Don't be so selfish. Take Ezekiel back soon. It's hard to explain to your parents. And don't come back again." Oriana stared at me for a moment before pulling Ezekiel away. Ezekiel clung to my leg, and Oriana was pulled down as he yanked her away. She fell to the ground. Ezekiel rushed to help her up, crying uncontrollably. "Dad, you really don't want us anymore? You don't love me and Mom anymore?" I sighed, helpless. "Ezekiel, you were the one who pushed me away first." I turned and walked away, not looking back at the two of them, leaving them to face their own lives while I moved on with mine. Chapter 15. The teachers at the orphanage knew I loved cooking, and they secretly signed me up for the King of Chefs competition. When I found out, I thought it was a bit funny, but I also wanted to participate and see how much my culinary skills had improved over the years. One of my goals for this competition was to bring more attention to our orphanage. The highest level of cooking only needs the simplest tools. I brought along the cooking tools from the orphanage and dived right in. Perhaps because I had spent so many years traveling and experiencing different cuisines, I had developed a better understanding and grasp of food. To my surprise, I made it to the finals. The headmaster and the children from the orphanage were cheering for me passionately from the audience. The final round was a themed challenge, Memories, where participants could create freely. As I looked at the cooking tools, many memories flashed through my mind. "Mr. Lee, may I ask why your award-winning dish was a simple-looking fried rice?" This competition had many sponsors and naturally attracted a lot of attention, facing all the spotlight. I answered, "The children at the orphanage have limited resources, but they love fried rice. I believe many people do, too." As I scanned the audience, I noticed Oriana and Ezekiel sitting among the spectators. I answered without glancing at them, "The first time you tasted fried rice, the person who made it for you must have been someone very special, someone you'd remember." After the interview, I was surrounded by the children, who were shouting, "Hero Dad," at the top of their lungs. I smiled as I walked out of the competition site to their cheers, and a reporter captured the moment. It became tomorrow's trending topic, "My King of Chefs Dad." Ezekiel tried to give me flowers, but he never got the chance to hand them to me. Oriana called out to me several times, but I just waved my medal at her and walked away in a carefree manner. Chapter 16. After all the twists and turns, I ended up visiting the Song family's ancestral home. My great-grandfather was gravely ill and wanted to have a bowl of my homemade dumpling soup. Although I no longer wanted to be involved with the Song family, some things are bigger than personal grudges. Father Song and Mother Song sat across from me, awkwardly. "Duncan, great-grandfather asked you for a favor." Great-grandfather had always loved cooking and had defended me on several occasions in public. If his health allowed, he would have made the food himself. I didn't pay much attention to Father Song and Mother Song and went straight to great-grandfather's room. His eyes were already clouded, but when he saw me, he immediately recognized me. "Duncan, why did it take you so long to come see me?" I walked over, took his hand, and apologized with a smile. Great-grandfather was silent for a moment before asking, "Is there no chance left between you and Oriana?" I didn't want to hurt the old man's feelings, but I didn't want to deceive him either. "No matter what, you will always be my respected grandfather." He sighed. "To be honest, Oriana already regrets it, and Ezekiel is a good kid, but he was raised wrong." By this point, hearing such comforting words didn't stir much in me anymore. I shifted the topic. "Grandfather, do you want the dumpling soup to be thicker or?" Great-grandfather suddenly grabbed my hand, and a flicker of faint hope appeared in his dim eyes. "Do you still love Oriana? If you do, even with my old bones, I'll fight for you to get back what you lost." I looked at this pitiful old man, still fighting for a love that could never be recovered. "Grandfather, I once loved Oriana deeply, and I held them above my life." Great-grandfather mumbled to himself, "Fate is cruel. Our Song family owes you. You're a good kid." The sound of broken glass echoed from outside. The noise came from Oriana trying to bring in a cup of water. She looked pale, a few strands of hair falling over her forehead, and she left in a daze. The old man sighed once more and told me to make the soup a bit thinner, as in his time, they didn't have thick soups. Chapter 17. As I was leaving the Song family's house, Alex was standing outside smoking. He'd always looked down on me, and now, seeing me again, he didn't bother to hide his disdain. What's so great about you? Does Oriana still miss you? I shrugged. That's your issue, not mine. Seeing my indifference, he became enraged and grabbed my collar. You left her all alone that night when she was drunk. She was still calling your name. Alex, that's enough. This is between the two of us. Oriana stepped in front of me, and Alex threw his cigarette butt to the ground, storming off. The scene was oddly reminiscent of 20 years ago, but back then, I was the one protecting her. Time flows like a river, and life feels like a fleeting dream. Oriana steadied herself and fixed her disheveled hair. Duncan, it's not just Ezekiel, it's me, too. We can't live without you. I keep wondering, if I hadn't gone back to the Song family, would we have been happier? She grabbed my arm. Duncan, come back, please. You still love me, don't you? I calmly took a step back. I've already spoken to grandfather. I don't want to say it again. In my memories, Oriana had never been this desperate before. Her lips trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes, silently sliding down her cheeks. When we first entered the Song family, Oriana was under a lot of pressure, and I would comfort her by analyzing the pros and cons. After she washed up, she'd always let her wet hair drip on my chest as she lay there quietly, listening to my heartbeat. I had believed that love would last forever, but it was only a fleeting moment. Oriana had indeed lost a lot of weight. I pried her hand away from mine, and her wrist was so delicate, I feared it would break if I held it too tightly. How can you prove that you don't love me? Duncan, don't lie to me. I didn't think money had corrupted love. It was just that money brought so many options that it made us feel that there was always more to come. So we no longer cherished what we had. All these years, I had become like a dish, from steaming hot to cold leftovers. It wasn't time that changed, but our hearts. I looked straight into her eyes and asked, why do I need to prove anything to someone who won't be in my future? Chapter 18. Afterward, I returned to the orphanage. I continued my food live streams, spending time with the children. The top fan was always the first to arrive in my live stream. I scrolled through their posts. Their profile was as clean as a new account. On New Year's Eve, I wrapped dumplings. I asked my fans in the live stream to guess what the filling was. I emphasized that the dumplings were for me, as I had quite an unusual taste. There were many comments, but no one guessed correctly. Then, the top fan left a comment, sauerkraut filling. They quickly logged off. That one sentence made me sure it was Oriana. Once the clock struck midnight, I hurried the children to bed. I went outside to look at the snowman they had built and took photos for memories. I noticed car headlights at the entrance, and only then did I realize there were two figures standing in the snow, waiting for I don't know how long. Happy New Year, Dad. I didn't take the gift Ezekiel was holding, nor did I care. He was anxious and opened the box to show me a basket of dumplings. Dad, these were made by Mom and me. We even kneaded the dough ourselves. Oriana carefully spoke. Try them. It's your favorite flavor. And here's a bowl of noodles, the one you taught me how to make. It tastes. I glanced at it and spoke indifferently. This food has already gone cold. I had said that very same line during our divorce, and Oriana naturally understood its meaning. The moonlight in the snow reflected off her face, making her look pale. Oriana wanted to say something, but the past was gone, and what was spilled could no longer be gathered. Ezekiel's face darkened. He refused to leave with Oriana. He was forcefully pulled back by the Song family's bodyguards, but he was still shouting, Mom, you're a liar. You said if we made food for Dad, he would come home. Ezekiel struggled desperately, banging on the car window. Dad, I was wrong. I was wrong. Dad. The car drove off, but his cries were loud enough to wake the children, who hadn't fallen asleep yet. They rushed outside, worried, surrounding me. Dad, if you want to go back home, we'll support you. The children of the orphanage were all sensitive, which made it even more heart-wrenching. Looking into their bright eyes under the moonlight, I held them close. Dad isn't going anywhere. This is Dad's home. I'll always stay with you. In the distance, the colorful fireworks streaked across the sky, showering blessings on everything. The family sits together, the lights warm and welcoming. With the 4 seasons, 3 meals of fire, I will no longer feel sorrow for anyone, and my life has no regrets. Chapter 19. Ezekiel's epilogue. The thing I regret the most is saying to my father's face, you don't deserve to be my dad. After I said that, my father's expression was calm. There wasn't even a hint of disappointment. Later on, I repeatedly caused trouble in front of my mother, demanding that she bring Dad back. Although our family had no shortage of capable people, no one could cook the same delicious dishes, and no one cared for me as carefully as he did. I was still young, but I could sense that this loss would bring me unbearable pain. After that new year, I stopped bothering my mother about finding Dad, because I knew, like me, she had been permanently shut out by him. I ran to my grandparents, demanding to change back to the surname and to take my father's name. My grandparents thought it was all Dad's doing, and they even wanted to go find him. It was then that I realized that from the very start, with my surname, my life had been shackled by something beyond my control. I threw myself into studying, trying to grow, hoping that one day I could stand on my own and find my father, to prove that I wasn't the same naive child anymore. But my father was heartless, and he didn't leave me any chances. The year I came of age, my father suddenly collapsed at the orphanage. Mom got to the hospital before I did, and when I hugged her, I noticed how much more white hair she had. If it weren't for my support, she would have been powerless, collapsed on the floor. The doctor came out and shook his head. At that moment, I realized clearly, my mother and I would spend the rest of our lives numbing our pain with memories. Mom's face was ashen, no longer showing the spirit of a corporate president. She hunched over and, in a breathless voice, asked, "Why? Why so suddenly?" He was still so young. The doctor removed his mask and sighed. Did the patient suffer a head injury in his younger years? The blood clot caused pressure, and now it's erupted as a medical condition. Mom suddenly trembled violently, nearly fainting. She was unconscious for 3 days, and her hair had completely turned white. Later, I found out that during a rainy season, my father had gone to the hospital to deliver food to Mom when he had a car accident on the way. His head was badly injured, but to save money for Mom's nutrition and recovery, and not to worry her, he only did a simple bandage on the wound. That injury, years later, became the bullet lodged in the brows of both my mother and me. Mom's mental state deteriorated, and she soon withdrew from managing the company. I asked Mom, where was Dad's ashes? She said, they were buried in the back mountain of the orphanage with the old director. That was where Dad belonged. After countless rejections from my mother, Alex chose to go abroad to expand his business. I took over the company from Mom, and only then did I have the freedom to learn about my father. Dad didn't know, but that year, in the King of Chefs competition, the fried rice he made was eventually bought by Mom and taken away. After his divorce from Mom, Dad never lacked admirers, but he never remarried. I think he truly gave all his love to Mom and me, and because we didn't cherish it, he was unwilling to try love again. Mom bought back the small house they had lived in, despite my grandparents' objections, and settled there. The previous owner of the house handed her a notebook, asking her to keep it safe, hoping that when the first owner returned, they could have it back. When Mom chose to end her life at the age of 45, I found the notebook in her hands. I discovered it was my father's diary, with many pages, a few of which had been circled in red pen by Mom. "This is the diary Oriana gave me. I will cherish it." Oriana confessed to me, said she would give me a home. "From now on, I won't be alone anymore. Oriana is pregnant. I'm going to be a father. I'll work hard to provide a better future for her and the child." The Song family is indeed large, but my love for Oriana is bigger than the universe. Oriana and Ezekiel don't need me anymore. I've decided to leave. The diary stopped there, and beneath it, Mom had written a single line, "Duncan, I'm sorry. I've come to find you." And from that day onward, I had no path to return to. I became a child without a father or a mother.